Welcome to the Soccer Coaching Podcast, brought to you in association with our friends at Soccer Coach Weekly, reflecting our shared ambition to help coaches have the most effective, enjoyable and successful coaching journey for them and their players. We hope you enjoyed this episode and thanks for listening. John and Ray, welcome to the podcast. How are you both doing?
Oh, Scott, yeah, this is it. You don't know who to go first. Yeah, I'm good anyway. So we've got an Irishman, an Englishman, and a Scotsman today, yeah?
There's some jokes in there somewhere.
How many jokes do we want? I once went a bus. I used to be afraid of flying. I once went a holiday to Salou via bus from Cumbernauld, and I'll get to the point of the story. This was 2005, so there was no internet, there was no mobile phones, there was very limited. And within the bus that took us 20 hours to Salou, there was about 20 hours of types of jokes that were Scotishman, Englishman, Irishman. It was a different time. I could rhyme off thousands of jokes, but it's probably inappropriate now, so we'll move on.
We could change the podcast and just do that for an hour because, to be fair, mate, 2005, there was internet and there was...
Yeah.
There's the first one.
Not on this bus, there wasn't.
Well, we could make some jokes about who's qualified and not qualified for the World Cup, couldn't we, John, to be fair? But we'll let that one go as well, shall we, for now at least?
Yeah,
given the theme that we're on. Well, brilliant. Look, well, I'm excited about this one because we'll see. We'll get posted in a minute, especially if that's okay. But we're going to talk about the World Cup, which seems like it's time now, isn't it? We can start enjoying it. The domestic season's over. All the big stuff's done, and we can start turning our eyes on that. So it'll be a bit different to a normal episode, Ray, where we're going to have we'll obviously channel some coaching points into this. We'll crowbar them in if we have to, but it's more a chance to chat around the World Cup stuff.
Yeah, I think I looked at John's work, which obviously we'll get into, and hopefully the listeners then, certainly on his Twitter and things like that, can jump on and just see the body of work that's there. Like, it's coaching gold as well, you know what I mean, in terms of now we'll have to all work very hard to translate what Argentina are going to do tactically in the World Cup and translate that to our team on a Saturday morning at our age and our level and all that sort of stuff. But it doesn't mean it's not very, very useful to have a look at that top end, especially over, a World Cup, 7 weeks of football every day, pretty much. And it's, I think it's such a fantastic time, I think, for coaches in a totally different way than normal. But there's loads that could be done for sure.
Yeah. Brilliant. Well, on that note then, John, if it's okay, thank you for joining us for this episode. You sound like the perfect man given the work you've done. I've seen the work you've done. It's phenomenal. And before we get into that, are you happy to just kind of say hello and talk about who you are, what you do, what you do, something the audience know?
Yeah. I am a UEFA licensed coach, but like everyone that knows how football is, especially in Scotland, there's not a lot of money. So on those B&A licenses, they preach a lot about not trying to become a head coach because your chances of becoming a head coach are very limited. So on that kind of chatter, I took a real interest in analysis. I thought that was going to be a route and an avenue that I could probably break into. I didn't do anything in social media then. That was very much me reaching out to football clubs and just asking around from what the Scottish equivalent to like National League South is, and got someone to come back to me, Mick Kennedy, who was Darvel manager at the time. And Darvel were 7th tier of Scottish football. Went in to be an analyst just to try and get a feel for what semi-professional football felt like, the type of people you were talking about, because I'd only ever coached academies, so Partick Thistle, Cumbernauld Colts, boys clubs like that. So I'd never dealt with senior players or people that were getting paid to play football, and that is a whole different beast to dealing with young kids and coaching young kids, because people don't want analysis, they don't want to talk about football, they just want to play football, which is completely understandable. But I was very fortunate that Mick Kennedy gave me that opportunity. Within that first year at Darvel, we probably had the biggest cup shock in UK football history, potentially world, when Darvel beat Aberdeen, who were 72 places above us in the Scottish Cup, won 1-0. That was probably the first time that I felt like my analysis was probably coming through to a level where I was like, oh, well, I could maybe go and push forward and make a career out of this. But as with everything, you're just so ingrained in football, and it's like 20 hours a week, you're doing your day job, you're doing your football, you don't really think outside of what's happening. But just was like getting drained with the hours that you were doing for free on the analysis side. So I was like, you know, I'm going to take some time out, going to go back, finish my A license. And off the back of that, I was like, do you know what? I'm watching all these Rangers games, who's my team that I follow. I was like, I'm going to start doing like analysis on Rangers opponents on social media and seeing if there's like a way to garner a bit of a following that could enhance my CV in a way that being an analyst for a six-tier side's not going to do, not going to progress you, because I had aspirations of going full-time in football and that being my job. So I did that and it became very fruitful. I covered the Euros. I'm laughing when I look at my Euro stuff compared to the content I'm putting out now. It's night and day. It's like you've just discovered fire to now having central heating in your house. It was no drawings, no voiceover, grainy standard definition clips. So just constantly pushing and trying to improve on that. And it probably did, unfortunately, take me away a bit from being a coach or being day to day with people or trying to work with people. But it's also opened me up to working one to one with like Cardiff's Alex Robertson. I'm his performance analyst. I do one to one stuff with him. Yusufa Sanyang, who went from Gambia, he went from the Senegalese Premier League to second tier in Sweden to now playing for the Czech champions Slavia Prague. I did one-to-one stuff with him. So my social media has opened me up to agents, clients, football players that have been interested, and since then it's just became very fruitful. And then the most recent thing, which you guys are talking about, is I decided for some reason, unbeknown to me, to take 8 weeks off and cover every team at the World Cup to try and bring in-depth analysis, because I'm somebody that's always like picked up 442 magazine, World Soccer magazine, watched every punditry interview to try and go, who are these teams I'm going to watch? It came from probably a betting angle before for me, going like, who am I going to bet on? Who am I going to cover? What games do I want to watch? But I was like, do you know what? If I'm interested in this, there must be other people that would love this content. So very fortunate that I got good sponsors to give me some finances that I could take the time out of work and take unpaid leave. But yeah, I've like loved it, and I think going back to what the whole purpose of us talking is, I've become fascinated with seeing all these different continents playing similar formations to each other. The 3-4-2-1, 3-4-3 formation it's like, well, I think there's about 17 teams that are going to be playing it at this World Cup, and that's across every continent. Things like that are really interesting to me. That these coaching ideas, they very clearly go forward to everyone. I've done all my coaching courses within the SFA. It's very rarely is Scotland the biggest nation. Well, it's the biggest single nation, but you're overwhelmingly the minority of the other groups of people. It's people from all over the world that come to Scotland to do their analysis, do their coaching badges. So there's obviously that influence that goes far and wide outside of it, and that's where I think it's really interesting when I look at Canada, Ecuador, Bosnia, all playing 4-4-2, all playing a very older, well, that's quite dismissive, but what feels like a antiquated system where two wingers that will put crosses into the box for two big centre forwards and a back four that defend, and that's their job. And I was like, this is amazing to see this across continents, that people are doing the same things. So I've loved it. I think it's been a real education for me doing this, and that's something I probably didn't anticipate getting back out of it.
How
Well,
different?
don't tell us too much, John, because that's how you've covered half my questions already. Getting some of this stuff, but a great intro. Sorry, Ray. Go on.
Going to say, how different is it? Because and this is not a plug because by now this is free. So I did a post tournament analysis. So I did a book on the World Cup in 2014. Um, and I doing it post tournament, it's much easier because you've got the body of work there, you've got the evidence there, it's showing you it's already happened. Doing it before the tournament, that's difficult. And if we could relate that to what an analyst does at a football club as well, in terms of preparing for games, where you've got to stick your neck out and go, I think they will play this way. I think they will use this personnel in this way. I suppose there's loads of questions off the back of that, but what's the process in doing that? When, because I think back to what I did in 2014, and just from memory now, I seem to remember Argentina struggling in the first half of their first game in one formation. I can't remember what it was, changing at halftime and then changing again. So by the time the second game had turned around, they kind of cycled through maybe all the ideas that we were kind of thinking beforehand. How do you deal with all that? And what happens when that does happen, when you kind of cycle through or there's an injury that changes it?
Well, there's multiple things there to touch upon right away. I put out all the teams obviously prior to the Scotland Curaçao friendly on Saturday, and then Curaçao throw in a 3-4-3, which they've not played in 4 years. So that was a real surprise considering it's the same manager, the same clientele within the squad, and then they throw out a 3-4-3. And you know what it's like. The minute you do that, people go, I thought you said they were going to be 4-3-3. And I was like, well, they were going to be. And then within that, you're talking about key players. In Austria, I've highlighted Christian Baumgartner as being the person I think is going to be one of the players of the tournament. Pulled his hamstring last night. He's out of the tournament. So you're putting all these pawns in place. I going, this player's going to be elite. I've put him in my fantasy team. This team are going to play this way. They changed their formation. You're like, cool. But that's why I've kind of taken the 7 weeks off to commit to the fact that I will dive into everything after the game. If a team change their formation at half time, I will then do a highlight video that shows that they've changed that and why they're changing it. Because the idea for me is I want this to be a body of work that people are using because
Yeah.
it's going to be such a big tournament that's going to have loads of turnover. There might be staff, pundits, players that are doing network stuff that come in and look at my page and be like, I'm going to take that. That's covered what I needed to know and just constantly updating. That's why I've taken the time off is because I feel like I don't just want it to be a one and done thing. I want it to be live throughout the tournament that can be. I'm kind of trying to pitch myself, I guess, to nations and clubs that I'm pretty good at what I do. And if you wanted somebody with this level of analysis, here it is.
Well,
Good,
look, yeah.
good.
There's two things in my head there, John. I'm thinking, number one, I'm thinking if you've highlighted me as a potential like star of the World Cup, I'm thinking I'm going to get injured now. You've got security there. Hold on a minute. And also, if I'm like, the manager and I see you've analysed our team perfectly well, I'm thinking you've given all my secrets away here. What are you doing? But I guess, to your point, these things aren't secrets anymore, are they? I mean, if you do your research, your analysis, it's out there to be found, isn't it? So, it's different to maybe 30 years ago when you couldn't get this stuff that easily, and the World Cup was the window to see different continents and countries play. But I guess that's not the case now, right? Would that be fair to say?
I remember for my sins being a Rangers fan, I did go to the Celtic convention one year because Postecoglou was a manager, and I was fascinated with Ange Postecoglou. It was something I hadn't seen in Scottish football. I'd never seen this style and this tempo and this aggression of football, and I was like, my mate's a big Celtic fan. He was like, mate, I can get you in for half price because we've been invited. And I was like, do you know that way? I was like, I really want. He's the champion of Scotland just now. He's dominating the league. I'm keen to see what he does. And we were asking when he was doing his presentation on his style of play, we were like, can we take photos of this? And he was like, take photos of what you want. He goes, I'm not going to change how I play. He goes, it's no secret. He goes, and I think they were playing Motherwell on the Saturday, and he said, Motherwell still need to stop me. He goes,
Yeah.
everyone can know how I play, but nobody knows how to stop it. So Motherwell can try. And that's kind of my attitude. That's why I was so surprised with the whole Southampton Middlesbrough carry on. I was like,
What are you going to be learning?
yeah, like within 20 minutes of this new system that Middlesbrough were trying out, their analysts are down at Southampton's bench and being like, by the way, we need to change something now, they're doing this. And it's
Mm.
the surprise element's gone within 10, 15 minutes because your analyst is on top of things. So like you said, these aren't secrets. This isn't hidden. This information's widely available. And I think that's probably part of why I did this, because it's to show that there's no secret sauce in analysis. It's hours and watching and
Yeah.
analysing and pulling it together to put into like a nice, easy 5 minute. Here's what you're
Well,
looking at.
I guess that's the science of it. That's your expertise, right? You know what you're looking at, and you know how to look at these things. Like, I mean, we could all look at a game and have our own opinions, but you'll have watched so much football and analysed so many things that you'll be able to recognise the patterns, the trends, and the stuff, and then obviously articulate that in a way that we can pick up and understand it, rather than doing all that slog, ourselves, which is, very time consuming, and also having that trained eye, right? I guess it's not as easy as I don't want to make it sound like it's easy, because it's not easy, right? It's there, the information's there, but actually to pull it out is an art in itself, I'd imagine.
I think pulling it out's probably easy. I think once you watch enough football, you can decide what teams are doing very quickly and see it. And once you're doing it for 10 hours a day, you're like, this is easy. But the biggest thing for me is I think I'm pretty good at explaining things in layman's terms. I think I'm pretty good at explaining things to the general person that doesn't want to talk about high pressing and how people
Mm.
change their body angles to press. They're like, just tell me what it is they do, tell me where it is they attack to, and then tell me what they do after that. So I think I've always kind of tried to base that on that because I'm very fortunate with the types of people I've worked with in football who are like that. John Rappett, just keep it simple. I don't want to hear all this technical detail. Just tell me how they play, where I need to press, how my opponent's going to be. Keep it simple, man. And that's always what I've tried to do and always tried to keep it really short.
Yeah.
For coaches listening, John, where would you start? So if you were going to analyze an opponent, and whether that, it doesn't matter for this question's purposes anyway, it doesn't matter if it's Brazil or the dog and duck that you're going to watch a couple of times, or maybe you've played against them a couple of times. Where do you start? Do you go? I wonder, do you take your influence from coaching and you start in one of the four moments, in or out of possession, or do you start with the structure of the team? What does that look like?
I start with box entry, for
Okay.
and against. So always box entries for and against from one game. So I'll take the most recent game and I'll watch the full game and clip all the box entries to try and see it. Is it from crossing? Is it from underlapping runs? Is it from overlapping runs? Is it from direct dribbles from the wingers? To try and get an idea of who, because there'll be some teams I know loads about, but then there'll be teams like Curacao that I'd never seen. So I'm like, how did they get their goals? It might be
Mm.
that there's no pattern to their game. It might be that they've got wingers that are 1v1 and they're good at doing that, and that's kind of what they do. Then you just work backwards from the structure and go, right, how do they get people in those positions? So if Mexico, a lot of Mexico's goals come from crosses from their fullbacks, how do they get into that? Well, they move their front three really narrow and let their fullbacks become wing backs and push on. So now I know your structure, right? So what does the structure look behind that? What's their rest defence that they keep structure behind? It's always a 2 and 3. They don't let their three midfielders go. They keep that structure really tight. And you're like, well, okay, right, now I kind of know what Mexico do, right? How do they concede goals? Where's their weaknesses? And then you get like different ideas for people. Then you get teams like Colombia, who like 90% of their goals are counter attacking from deep, and they don't particularly even play a low block, which is fascinating to me because it means it's just a lot of transitional work that's happening probably quite naturally. But yeah, start with box entries, try and get an idea what they're doing, and then I look at the formations because I always feel like formations are probably the lowest denominator. It doesn't really matter. Like a team could start in a 4-3-3 and very quickly be 3-4-3 or 3-5-2 if a midfielder drops in between centre halves and pushes full backs on. It can all change. So I try and move away from that and not get too attached to that. It is how the box entries occur in
It's
for me.
interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting because two things for me really. The How you score and how you concede are probably the biggest pieces of information, and then everything else kind of contributes to that, doesn't it? The let's figure out what happens in the box and then work our way back either way. I remember watching. It's interesting you spoke about a 2 and a 3 there, for example. Uh, the zone last summer during the Club World Cup. I don't know if you picked up some of the games on there, some of the analysis shows. It was the very first time I saw on TV where analysts were talking about teams playing instead of a 4-3-3, they were talking about teams that would play, for example, a 2-3-5 or a 3-2-5 or a 3-1-6 and things like that. Where do you sit on all that? Like, I don't know exactly what the question is, to be fair, but if it's, are we going to move on, do you think, from this kind of idea that a 4-4-2 and a 4-3-3 and move it into a different phase of the game to analyze?
I think so. I remember a quote from Guardiola during his like sabbatical year. He was doing like some talk in America, and he said that like for me, he said he thought in like 3-4 years, this was like 2013 after Bayern. He said he thought that in 2-3 years people would stop using formations as a reference point, and it would just be an out of possession structure. And he talked about the kind of 2-3-2-3, the way the two attacking midfielders would play, and the way the fullbacks would kind of be structured and inside the pitch in front. And he was like, it's a 2-3-2-3. It's not a 4-3-3. And I was
Mm.
like, oh. And he was like, I don't think we even need to discuss what the formation is. It's just where are the players? Where do they go? Where do they feel they go? And then you've got this whole, I love the cultism, but the kind of rise of relationism where people are like now going, ignore your formations, go where the ball is, play in difficult areas and get yourself out of those areas together. So I think so. I think football is becoming it will become a different sport because I just think there's so many talented players, and I think the formation positional obsession removed the individuality. And I think we're going to start seeing that come back with a removal of formations. It'd be like, just get your out of possession structure right. And then when you've got the ball, do what you want and go where you want. And then it'll become harder for analysts like myself to actually figure out what you're doing. Because if I look at all these rising teams like Mjällby and stuff in Sweden and look at the way they play, you go, I couldn't tell you how to cope with what they do because
Mm.
they'll have all 11 players in one small segment of the pitch, and you go, well, I can't send my centre halves to press in there because that's ludicrous. We're just going to have everyone in there half high up, but it might come to that because it's going to become that free and no specific. This is where people are going to be playing. This is it, and I think that's what will end up. There'll be a cycle, and that'll be the next cycle where it's kind of harder to pinpoint what people do and maybe just highlight what they like out of possession.
I
What do
have
you
a
know?
friend of, go on,
Go
Scott.
on. I was going to say, John, on that one then, did you find, because I totally agree with what you're saying, but it does feel like actually out of possession, you can kind of see more organization and more, I guess, traditional formation, where they're going like a 4-4-2 out of possession or whatever else. It seems like in possession, it seems more fluid, but out of possession, it seems very structured. Even watching just like, the club teams playing, I find it hard to see the in possession formation in a team. I can't really see what they're playing. It's too much for me. But out possession, it seems like it's clear. Is that a trend that you picked up on analysis that actually maybe, it's more fluid in possession, but not, maybe more structured out of possession?
Yeah, and the thing that I've noticed the most is how many teams are out of structures 4-4-2. It doesn't matter what their possession, it doesn't matter. So the 3-4-2-1 can become a 5-4-1 defensively quite quickly, but teams were pushing a midfielder out and a centre half up, and they were going into 4-4-2 to press. And that's what a lot of 4-3-3 teams are doing, is they're pushing one of the midfielders into that 4-4-2 press.
Yeah.
So all these teams seem to be, and I've that's the one thing I've always felt is clearest is when you're organising a team. The 4-4-2 at possession structure is the easiest to do because you just very much lock on to people man for man and push high up. And you just say to the others, your centre halves, you need to go and be aggressive against the next line. And it really simple for everyone. You get your left winger and go, you're in charge of the right back, wherever he moves, or the wing back, wherever he moves. I can pinpoint you players that you go man for man with. And I think you're looking at about 72% of teams are doing 4-4-2 out of structure, but
Right.
it's not 72% that are playing 4-4-2. It's only three teams.
Yeah. Yeah. Go on. Sorry, Ray, I cut you off there.
Yeah, look, the conversation evolves, doesn't it? It's just so interesting to see. A few years ago, when I was looking at, I think I was going through Transfer Market, the online database, and every coach I was coming across, it must have been 80-90% were 4-2-3-1, 4-2-3-1, which is fine, but that seems so shallow now. It just seems like it's the fluidity involved, and things like that. My question a minute ago was going to be around AI actually, and without kind of being too technical about it. I spoke to someone recently who works at a high level of the game, and he spoke about what their AI models were connecting. They were connecting pieces of information, even from the past, where, for example, this striker played this against this centre half in, half a dozen games before or something. But they were connecting dots that we as humans would never connect them. So my question was, well, do we now need to be more unpredictable, to stop AI agents and analysts picking up what we're going to do? Is that what you found as well?
I think so. I think it needs to be. You can't have. If I look at Rangers, Steven Gerrard title winning side 5 years ago, there was a very clear pattern of goalkeeper to centre half, fullbacks go as wingers, the wingers come in as tens, the flat free midfield when the fullbacks go beyond, the outside midfielders become false fullbacks. You couldn't stop it, but it was very rigid in what we were doing. It was like a machine the way you watched it. And I'm looking at that going, as long as you don't get caught between winger coming in and full back going beyond, you can structure your way to stop that playing and be very clear. I feel like the same with Postecoglou was true, was you could see what they were doing. It was just the intensity and ferocity which they did it. You couldn't really keep up with it, especially not in Scotland at the time. It was really difficult. Obviously, when upper level then really struggled in the Premier League because you're dealing with elite coaches, elite analysts, and there was a lack of predictability after like 15. I think Tottenham were top after 15 games, and then teams were like, "Oh,
Worked out.
we just need to stop the foot. We need to stop our attackers getting confused with the fullbacks come inside and the eights pop out. If we stop crossing over, they don't have the gaps." And I think that's what then happened. It's just everyone was like, "We know how we're doing it." And it wasn't until Postecoglou became a bit more rigid in the Europa run and they won that trophy that he learned his lesson. I think AI is going to kill us if we don't start doing that, and I think that's why the rise of relationism or diagonalism is going to kick off because it's almost impossible. Like when I watch that for folk that don't know or take interest in that stuff, it's like the amount of times that you would have a passing lane, you wouldn't want a player to cross another player's passing lane, and you're like, no, we do now though, because players are going to press that, and if you let it run through you, you're taking four people out with one pass, rather than people being like, don't get in front of him, so I've got that pass into him. That becomes predictable in nature. So it's that unpredictability, players feeding off each other, feeling off each other, learning how people play. A bit more off the cuff means that AI won't be able to infiltrate the analysis
Mm.
space if you do that, but analysts will have a harder time predicting what you're doing at all times. So I think it can come in, but I think football will get smarter and it will challenge it again and push back.
You mentioned there about be predictable, and if you use your Celtic and Rangers examples, obviously they're the best resource teams up there. So doing something and doing something well with the better players is a pretty good mix to win more often than not. But we're now seeing, and one of my questions earlier was going to be around, like, do you think anyone will get a real drubbing at this World Cup, considering that there's more teams and stuff like that? But I'm not sure they will either. And I'd love to hear your thoughts, just because of how good even smaller nations can be tactically now, whether that's with a low block and just killing space, or a version of Bodo Glimt that will just have a go regardless and be fit enough to, and things like that. Where do you stand on all that?
I think Jordan will take a big a big loss. I think they'll be the team that maybe stand out as being the poorest. I think everyone's probably seen the clip doing the rounds now about the striker refusing to stand off. And I like said in my analysis, there's no way Jordan can go toe to toe with anyone at this tournament. And then they go and try and do it against Switzerland and get absolutely battered. It was 4-1 going on 6, 7, 8, 9, and that's a friendly when Switzerland weren't even at full speed.
Mm.
And I think that's the bit that I've struggled with when I'm preparing for Scotland v Haiti, because I'm going, right, Scotland really, really battered Curacao, although they went down to 10 men. Curacao beat Haiti 5-1. The gaps between them are so huge, but also Haiti had good results, good performances against USA in the Gold Cup.
Mm.
Jordan got to the final of the Arab Cup and only lost narrowly to a top Morocco side. So it's hard to then go, I think Jordan will be beat, and then look at the evidence and go, well, they pushed Morocco to like the last 10 minutes of a cup in Morocco. I think will be one of the better teams at the tournament, probably the best from the African region. So I think that's really difficult. But if I was looking at it, I'd be looking at Jordan and going, I think they're really going to struggle. I just don't think they have the quality of player, unfortunately, to withstand what's going to come at them over 90 minutes.
Well, on that one then, John, just following on a bit, I'm thinking now, obviously looking at the England team, um, it seems to be that decisions are made more on the personnel that are available, like, and that would influence maybe how they'll play tactically and with formations. From your analysis, looking at all 48 teams, do you find that most are set in a formation, for what we've always qualified what that might mean, but actually like they've got a rough structure around it and then people get in there, or is it more actually, do you know what, they've got a squad of 20 odd players and that would take kind of which ones they put out are going to determine how they play? Because I would have thought at club level, it's more you kind of know most club managers will play a very similar formation or have two variants of that depending on what they're up against. But international, I thought it was a bit more open in the sense of people would, pick and choose their cards depending on what hand they're going to play based on the players they've got available.
Yeah, I think everyone probably has their set formation or variation of that formation that they'll stick to regardless. I think for type of player, I think the biggest ones for me that how do we categorize them? Do we categorize them as like we'll call them vibe teams? I think England, France, and Brazil are teams that I would say don't really have a style of play. They're very much get our key players in key areas and provide moments, and that's what will happen. England have got the best striker in world football just now. It's as simple as that. France have Mbappe, Olise, all these just elite level dribblers, pace, power, clinical nature. Then Brazil have got, if Brazil get going in a tournament that's in the region it's in, it's going to be really hard to stop Brazil.
Velocity,
But could I pinpoint a way of playing? No, I couldn't. Those are the ones I struggle with the most, which is funny because they're the ones you get the most footage of. But I would be saying Brazil, England, and France are going to play off the cuff, but they're going to be good when they do it because they've got elite level footballers.
Does that make it harder then to play against them for that reason? Is that part of it, or because you don't know if you're set up against England? I don't know how England are going to. I don't think he knows how they're going to play on match one necessarily, because he'll get a sense of who's up for it and what the other team are doing and stuff. So it's harder to plan against them, I guess.
I think so. I think so. I think so. If you're telling me that players like Saka, Bellingham, Anthony Gordon, Harry Kane are at the top end of a pitch, and you've got Declan Rice and Elliot Anderson controlling whatever breaks, you go, doesn't really matter how we think England are going to set up, or the fact that Saka will stay on the right, Gordon will stay on the left, Bellingham will kind of drift around, or Harry Kane will drop deep. doesn't really matter how much preparing you do for that. If a ball drops to Bellingham or Kane at 20 yards for goal, it's potentially going to end up in the back of your net, and you're just going to have to deal with that. If you figure out how France build out and you want to press high, they're going to go centre half and over the top of you, and Mbappe's going to get the ball. You don't, it doesn't need to. And I think this is where probably I've changed my opinions a little bit on football. You don't need to overcomplicate it. Sometimes if you have the best players, you just need to keep everyone happy and put the right 11 out. It doesn't really matter if there's cohesion there. Do they have the ability to create moments and win you games? Yeah, they do. Stick with that then.
John, you've got all the English folk excited now. You have what with Brazil and France. Come on,
That doesn't take much to do that, does it?
no, but like when we look at those three teams, right, and you could probably, if you look at all the groups and bar, I mean, I'm trying to say this in a nice way, the seeded team in each group. So let's take Canada out of that conversation, and maybe let's put Mexico and the United States as hosts into a different bucket. But all the rest of them, you have your Argentina, Belgium, England, um, Germany, all the other 10, Spain, all those 10 Netherlands seeded teams, they'll all expect to win. From and it's a kind of a frustration of mine when we talk about winners of tournaments, not just World Cups, but the Premier Leagues or Champions Leagues. It's hard to be that last team standing, isn't it? It's kind of like we'll probably have a good shout with all those 10 teams being in the last, between the last 8 and the last 16. But anything after that becomes down to a sub you make, a referee decision, a sending off, anything like that. What does your analysis say around winners?
I think, like you said, this is why I'm probably big on the moments factor. I remember 2014, the first knockout stage, Germany v Algeria. Algeria battered Germany that whole game. In extra time, battered them, and Germany just got through. That's a moment in time that you don't get the Germany-Brazil game. You don't get Germany winning that World Cup. You don't get all those things that could have happened. You could end up with Argentina, Brazil in the final, and it changes this whole dynamic of what we've seen that followed. I think too many teams, probably not a style of play. Like I think 2018 France were the best team throughout, but like if you take Mbappe out that side, France don't win that World Cup. For me, it's as simple as that. I think those teams that we've mentioned, the favourites, they're the best 10 squads at the tournament. Some of them have a specific style of play, but that doesn't mean you're going to win anything. I think probably Spain were the team with the most expansive way of winning any tournament in 2010. Argentina had a very good way of playing, I would say, on 2022, but it was very much 10 people were doing the work for one person to shine, and that was kind of, and that's probably the thing that is England have struggled with. It's putting your ego at the door to allow teams to do that. That doesn't always happen. Argentina will do that again. They're quite happy to discard their ego and just go, right, we've got one elite player still. We'll work around that. We don't need to be the best team at the tournament to get to a final and win. We just need to be in it to get to there. And once you get to the last 8 and last 4, it's there for you. It's there for you. So I don't think there's any set formula to win a World Cup. I think it's almost impossible to figure out what that is. And if it was possible, England would have figured that out more recently with the players they've had. But I think there's so much that has to go your way to be fortunate enough to do so. Like we talk about two of those winners, Spain in 2010, Argentina last time. They both lost their first group game to inferior teams, and that probably changed the whole dynamic of what they had to then do.
Yeah.
The I remember, and this is a really random memory, but it must have been 2006. I believe was that when Jurgen Klinsmann was the Germany manager. I can't remember exactly. They had a substitute that he would use quite frequently. A very very quick, like the Adama Traore of his time, a player called a
A
Donker.
Donker. Oh, what a player. The German Theo Walcott.
Yeah, and I don't know what he did before or after, and I probably should if I'm bringing him up on a pod. But my question was like, if you have, let's call them outlier players like that. Like a player, for example, Peter Crouch, I would consider an outlier player because he's got different attributes than everyone else. Is it as important then, do you think, to have outlier players like that in your squad to allow you to I don't know. You're down to 10 men. You've got to sit back. So we'll put on this, really quick guy that will get us up the pitch. You know what I mean, and solve problems that you can't exactly see. We always look at tactics. I always say we do it at 0-0. We look at how a team plays at 0-0 for their purest ideas. But it's when the game changes and you need extra players. Is their squads particularly good at that, do you think?
To be honest, I wouldn't actually say so. I think everyone's kind of got those players in their starting 11 that they're wanting to really push. I think if I look at like Scotland, Ben Doak is by no means a finished article, but Ben Doak has to play every single game because he's kind of got that Theo Walcott, a Donker thing where he's got rapid pace, direct running at people, doesn't really care for anyone's reputation. You've seen that against the likes of Guardiola and Nuno Mendes when Scotland played them in the Nations League. He didn't care for their reputation, just was very direct and fearless. And I think the same with like Spain, like Yamal's their star. They're not going to leave him on the bench to be impact. I think a lot of those teams have already set. I think Australia's maybe the only one that's thrown a bit of a span on the work with Tete Yengi, who is uncapped on loan in Israel from Livingston in Scotland. So a very kind of, but he's 6'7" and he's a centre forward and he's got pace. They've probably looked at him for that exact point and been like, if we're tight in games, especially the last game, and we need to win this and go direct, we've got a 6'7" striker that's mobile.
Yeah.
That might be the one where you go in a very tight group. That might be one that's specific and unique to what they'll do. I don't think there's any other teams that have that real thing where I'm going, wow, that would change what they do. That would be very different. And I think like what you're saying is when I look at Russell Martin's Rangers, like for all he had like horrendous times, the best times for somebody considering Russell Martin had such a specific style of play in a way he wanted Rangers to play, his best moments in Rangers domestically was kind of when the last 50 minutes and we weren't winning and he just threw forwards on the pitch and just was getting volume crosses into the box and getting chances. And it was just that kind of desperation and numbers and aggression that led to goals off the back of that and saved little points that we got. I think there might be an element of that, especially with this. I hope we're not over egging this tournament, but the pitch that USA and Senegal played on the other night was embarrassing. Like
Mm.
it was absolutely embarrassing to the point that I'm surprised that nobody's covered it. I don't know if people just didn't watch it. It's an absolute disgrace how bad that pitch is. So you could have teams that are maybe not comfortable having like a set playing out on these types of pitches and want to go more direct, and that might lead to teams going like another striker on the pitch where they would previously went a 4-3-3. But along with answering your question, I think Australia's the only one where I look at the squad and go, that's different if they throw him on.
I find that fascinating because I think we've moved on, and I would like to think that people watching a World Cup would move on from the idea that you would have a formation, you would have your starting 11, and then you would have a backup 11 that kind of just went like pawn for pawn, right back for right back, and all that sort of stuff. And having those outlier players to give you some sort of advantage, but having a Kieran Trippier that'll play as your cover left back as well as you cover right back or something like that. I just thought maybe it's squad building like that might produce some of those moments you spoke about.
Yeah, I just think it's just teams are so set on what they have because they need to do the qualifying campaigns and they probably don't have enough time with the players that they would change what they would do. It's keep like it's going back to the 4-4-2 and stuff like that. Sometimes just keep it simple and let it go. But like if you look at France, like Mbappe drops out, a Turan comes in, Elise drops out, another winger comes in. It's very like for like all across the pitch. There just isn't. I guess there just isn't that variety. I think it does stay pretty consistent position for position, and I don't think there's too many teams that have real changes. I think the only one I look at is the Norway thing with the 4-4-2 or switching to the 4-3-3 with Soloff, because he is a 6'3" striker who dribbles like a 5'10" winger. Like he's very capable of doing both things, full of pace, full of power. That if you look at his direct strike partner on Haaland can't dribble like a 5'10" winger. Haaland is pace, power, physique, and probably the best finisher in the world just now. But Soloff is capable of doing all those things and then do the tricky wing play, the crosses into the box on both feet. So maybe he's like a kind of unique player, but he would start in either
Yeah.
formation.
Yeah.
So, John, moving aside from the players, then looking at the teams more broadly, obviously you've looked at all 48 countries. I'm assuming you've done all 48 countries. I think you have, haven't you? Yeah, fair play to you. Um, and we'll be familiar with some of those because we'll have seen some of those, and a lot of those players may play in the leagues we watch. But from your analysis point of view, did you come across anything particularly interesting that maybe would be a surprise or something we wouldn't have seen with regards to maybe a tactical setup or something, whether it's how they attack the box or whatever else that is a bit more off-piste?
Uh, Nothing off piece, just Ecuador in general. Ecuador
Yeah,
are like a bit of a blueprint of De Zerbi type 4-4-2 football, and there's like a mix of, if you watch them, you could swear you're watching Leicester in 2016.
yeah,
The Enner Valencia, like a Jamie Vardy tribute act, Moises Caicedo and Golo Kante. They're that kind of like Nkapie at Arsenal being your kind of Christian Fuchs big centre half playing at left back. They're like a lot of fun. They kept 11 clean sheets in the South American qualifier. I mean, nine of them were 0-0 draws, by the way. But they are like a really fun team. Like I was quite impressed with them at 2022, but they had a couple of stinking results that meant they didn't go as far as I thought they would. I think the way they are, the way they set up, the energy of people like Moises Caicedo is unbelievable. I think they will be a big surprise at this tournament. I think they're the ones that I watch and go, I want that. That's the team that I'm going to be looking forward to watching.
well, that's my next question, I guess. Like, given what you've looked at, and obviously knowing, the climate, and well, although some games are in aircon, aren't they? It's like, but like just getting the whole for everything. Do you have some predictions about particular teams that you think may do well? I mean, you may have the obvious ones, I don't know, but also any kind of outliers that may come through the back door potentially.
Yeah, I mean, I think Norway will do well. I think Austria would have been one, but I think without Baumgartner, that's like a huge loss because his creativity this season's been exceptional. So he's that one's kind of hurting a little bit where I look and go, I think that'll impact them highly. I don't see who they've got to come in for that place. So Norway, I just love the way they play, and that was last night without Haaland or Odegaard. I'm looking at them and going, they could be tasty if they get out of the groups. Ecuador need to get out of the group, but if they can piece together goal scoring on top of what they're doing, they could be fun because I don't think they'll concede. Famous last words. I
Yeah.
don't think I don't think they'll concede a lot of goals, and they are very good on the counter attack. And Enner Valencia's pace is ridiculous. Uruguay are going to be fun because I could watch Bielsa's teams play all day. Like the amount of goals they conceded winning in the 90 plus minutes is insane. But I hope he never changes because if I'm watching a Uruguay game at 2 a.m., I'm going to need to stay awake. So
Yeah.
they would be an absolute big one. And then I think it's really like what nations would I think will struggle? I think Croatia will have a worse tournament than people anticipate now because I think a
It's
lot
the
of their
same. It's the same squad, isn't it? And
yes.
that they've had the last 25 years. It feels.
So a lot of their generation, I think, is unfortunately coming to an end, and I think you'll see that they'll maybe struggle a little bit more. The African nations really interesting. I think Ivory Coast really good. I watched them against Scotland in the last break. I was so impressed with them that how happy they are to cheat. See with like the four front four, like the 4-4-2 is kind of a 4-2-4, and they did seem to just be like that to their four defenders and their two centre mids. You just need to deal with all the attacks because when we win, we're going to counter. And it felt like that was what I was watching with Diomande and Diallo as the wide men, and then Pepe kind of playing off a centre forward. And so quick when they won the ball back. I really hope that's something they continue with. I hope they just say, "Do you know what? Let the fullbacks go 2v1 and we'll deal with cross into the box and we win it, we're going." Because that will
Mm.
then lead to all these different types of contests when you're going to be really surprised. So they would be a big one on the African side. Morocco won't be a surprise to anyone, but I think they'll be good. I think they'll be really good. It's interesting they're kind of caught between the previous manager and the new guy that's taken over, and a lot of the people with the new guy had said his 23s were a bit more expansive than the previous manager, but when a previous manager takes you to the World Cup semi-final, I don't think you get to really criticise what he was doing with the team.
Yeah.
Where do you stand on national identities and tactics? So I'll give you an example. Like you've already said that, and it's Carlo Ancelotti all over, isn't it? That Brazil will they'll put you can't put them all on, but they'll put the best players on the pitch in the best formation they think they can, give them a structure around it, and go for it. But you think of Brazilian football through the years, you think of flamboyance and flair, you think of Dutch football throughout the years, you think of English football throughout the years. I feel like, and you can absolutely correct me on this, I feel like Spain are often the only ones that you will guarantee will play like the stereotype or the culture thinks. What have you noticed from all your analysis work on them? Is that national identity thing, is that about dead now, or where do you know, where's that going?
Spain are definitely that. Spain are set up like there's no surprise that there's no Real Madrid players in the Spanish squad, but it's littered with teams that play like the Spanish side in Barcelona. So they very clearly have their identity that they want to be like. Germany's probably got its identity right. They're probably still 4-2-3-1. It's still very similar to what they've been doing for the last 20 years and what they've tried to replicate from 2014. Norway, I would say, are now looking like a Nordic or Scandinavian side that I grew up watching, like in the 90s. I said that in my tweet. I was like, this is like watching Denmark in 2002. It's two wingers, it's two big centre forwards. It's there's no shock to the system. They're going to try and get it wide and they're going to try and get crossed into the box. And I was like, this is like amazing to watch. Brazil, they don't have a style, but they've definitely got an identity. It's put your best players on the pitch and try and get magic working. It's as simple as that. I don't think outside of that, I think there's a lot of teams. I would like to see England go a bit more direct. I think if England got more aggression, more direct, and then kind of said to the likes of Rice and Anderson, you just need to just work up and down that pitch all game long, and we'll get the creativity at the top end and just smother teams rather than Harry Kane coming 40 yards, 50 yards, 60 yards from goal to link up play. You're like, no, 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 no. You just be where you need to be. We'll get the ball to you and we'll play from there. I think that's an identity that England have lost a little bit. I think England's best teams have been, I mean, although they've got to finals and stuff, I think they've just missed out a little bit because they've not been quite as direct or as aggressive as they could be. I think that could change with the squad they've got now because I think they're pretty much set for being really athletic.
The
So
manager, maybe the manager seems to be he'll do anything to win. It feels.
yeah, I think that's probably an interesting one. It'll be interesting to see what happens with the minute the pressure comes on and the minute that starts to thing because the one thing they never had with Gareth Southgate is they never really had anything biting back at them, despite the fact he pretty consistently delivered at the latter ends of tournaments. He just never got over that line. It'll be interesting to see what happens there. But outside of that, I don't really think there is a proper identity coming through in other teams. I think those are the ones that you kind of go and you relate to what you've grown up on.
United
On that,
States.
Gory.
No, I heard oh, say his name for me now. Pochettino talking on a rival podcast, Scott, on the overlap about
There's no rivals. We're all family.
talking about the expectation, for example, in the United States, which to us seems a little silly, potentially, but the expectation is to win and to win the thing. And I suppose we could lump Mexico and Canada to a certain degree into that as well. What advantage does home advantage bring, do you think? You spoke about Brazil being on their continent, so to speak, and the champions tend to come from the continent. I think until Germany a few years ago.
Yeah,
Um,
I think that's pretty much a nail on the head. I think it's huge. Like I've said this I felt this way for years about things like energy and that and the stuff that crowds can harness. I remember Rangers getting to Europa League final in 2022, and I think after Rangers beating Dortmund, I think every fan that went to those games at Ibrox believed Rangers were going to knock out the team they were playing. And against Leipzig, it was the same. There was like everyone in that stadium, like you turned up, they were like, "We're going to do it tonight. We're going to go through." And I think that energy transfers onto the pitch. I think you seen it in with South Korea in 2002. I think they were probably the biggest evidence. I think you seen it with oh my God, was it Ghana that got to the quarterfinals in South
yeah.
Africa?
Mhm.
That was like a whole continent supporting whatever team was going to go furthest, and you definitely felt that. Brazil, I think you seen the energy shift in that Germany game because they were missing Neymar. So I think you could see the panic with Neymar and Thiago Silva being suspended from that Germany game. You could feel the fans. You could hear them all saying that they'd kind of lost their chance because those players were missing. And I mean that doesn't contribute to losing 7-1, but it definitely has an influence when you go 2-0 down and fans are crying because you're like, "Ah, The one thing America's got going for them, and to be fair, Mexico as well, because their fans are insane, is that belief in kind of self confidence might transfer very quickly onto the players. I think Christian Pulisic believes USA have got a chance of winning the World Cup. From reading what Mexican commentators and stuff are saying, I think they believe that they've got like a really good squad and a real good chance of having a crack at this. Canada are maybe the more humble or more modest out of a lot of them. I think that's very just Canadian to be fair, but I think they're maybe a bit more reserved in what their expectations are. But I think watching USA against Senegal, they're very good at quick play. Like if they get into your third with teams have impressed them, they can score goals. They can definitely score goals. They've got Balogun, Tillman, McKennie, Pulisic. They've got a whole range of people that can create and score. Mexico have got a really good style of play and it's really aggressive. If they win a game early on in that tournament and get out the groups, good luck to
Anything
any.
can happen then, can't they?
Yeah,
One-off games, you know,
good
and
luck to any team. Good luck to any team that have to go and play them at home and knockout stages with climate, stress, panic. Because like you seen with like Arsenal, the players were very open and honest after winning the title. Stress and nerves get to you. There's no way of hiding from it. You can pretend you don't go and they can read all of them that say they don't look at social media. It's don't push the red button or that there's wet paint here. Everyone's going to have a wee feel and see if it is wet paint and push the red button
Yeah.
and see what happens. You just can't help yourself. So it definitely will contribute. It's who's going to have that kind of mental fortitude to deal with that. But I mean, I could equally see USA struggling as I could see USA going on a run and starting to go far in the tournament. I think it's definitely the best
Yeah,
group.
it's how they take that pressure, right? Isn't it? It's if it feeds them in a positive way, they could kick on. But if it comes as like a weight on top, it might suppress their
Yeah,
ability to deliver.
yeah, and I think like they've definitely got the quality at the top end of the pitch. Like it's as good. It's definitely as good as I know I've seen Landon Donovan talking nonsense about the players that he had in his squads prior. They had good players in the squads before, but Brian McBride and Clint Dempsey were great players, but they're not at the level of Christian Pulisic and they're not at the level of Florian Balogun. They're just not.
Mm.
Those are players that could go and play top level Premier League and succeed and be top players in Europe. I mean Christian Pulisic is. He's just not quite had the run of fitness to keep himself at that level. So yeah, they I think they've got the right amount of like self belief. That's just an American way. I think if they get a couple of wins early on, it's very much in that realm of going like good luck. I don't want Scotland to get out the group and have to go and play USA. That's as
Yes.
simple as that.
John, well, look, we've not asked this yet, but I think we have to ask it. I don't know how much of your analysis looks at this, but set pieces and penalties. How much is that going to play a part in this World Cup?
Yeah, and on my analysis, I've probably been quite light on the set play stuff just now because I think with set play work, what you probably see is a lot of it worked on just now pre-tournament when they're all got everyone together. They know what players they've got, they know what tools they've got in their arsenal. But there are like outliers. Like I said, Mexico were the best in the whole of the qualifying campaign across all. Sorry, comparing their Gold Cup stats because they obviously automatically qualified to other teams qualifying. Mexico's output from set plays was incredible. Czech Republic were the best from Europe, so it's no surprise that both those teams have scored from corners in the friendlies. There is a lot of that part. You don't know how many nations will have hired a set piece consultant or a set piece analyst just for this tournament to go into. I think when you're getting to a point of a tournament that could be sapping after teams have played 60 games at club level, teams breaking for their season to allow this World Cup to happen, you could see a lot of emphasis. If I look at Australia and you're telling me how are Australia going to score at this World Cup, it's going to be from a set play or direct play. That's going to be what they'll do. So there should be a lot of emphasis on it because I think Kyle Walker said something like, I mean, if you get a corner, you have to score for a corner. It's not like you shouldn't be looked down upon that that's the way you're settling games. This should be taken seriously. So I think it's a great leveler. It's a one-time game. Football stops. It's a one-time football stops, and everyone gets the same chance to do what they need to.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, you when most games, I don't know how concrete this is. Most games finish somewhere between 0-0 and 2-1. Do you know what I mean? So every goal is important. So I just think it's certainly off the back of the season we've had. I think it's such low hanging fruit to be well planned at the very least. For and against set plays, isn't it? To score that goal that might win you the game, or to indeed defend against that moment that might lose you the game.
Yeah, and I think that's exactly it. Now, especially now that teams know the squads, so they'll know who the set play takers are. They'll know who the key people are to attack the box that they need to worry about. They'll know their setup, and they'll already be looking at games. Like I looked at the Mexico Australia game, and I couldn't believe the way Australia set up for the corners that Mexico had, because you get a little bit of like, you kind of doing what we do. You kind of question yourself and go, right, what would I present to a coach if I wanted to do this? For me, it would have been loading your best headers at the front post against the Mexican corner, and they used their best headers in a man for man scenario. But they were very zonal with them, but they weren't touch tight. They were very kind of standoffish. And I was just looking at going, if I've got like a 6'5" Harry Suter, he's my front zone so that Mexico don't get that same flick on that they've had the whole way through the Gold Cup. But that they might just not have looked back that far. They might have looked at more recent set plays. They might have thought they wanted him man for man marking. There's all different ways to skin the cat, and it's whatever suits you. But you live and die by those little details. If Harry Soutter's at that front zone, Mexico don't score that goal in that friendly, and they don't beat Australia, and you've
Well,
got a chance.
England did in Russia, didn't they? You know what I
Yeah,
mean? They did. You know, that was going
amazing.
to be their marginal gain, and everything else was going to be as sort of straightforward as possible. What last one from me, John? What games, what matchup games in the groups are you most looking forward to?
Oh, right, here we go. Let's see who have we got. So for me,
Wall
Ec-
chart, but
so unfortunately, Ecuador played Germany in the last game, so that could actually end up being. I mean, if things go the way you think, Germany might already be out that group. That might allow Ecuador to look better. So Ecuador, Ivory Coast at the start of that tournament, because those are probably going to be the ones vying with Germany to get on the other end of that tournament. Um, South Korea, Czech Republic will be good, because that's two teams that play a very similar brand of football but very different approaches to it. Czech Republic are a little bit more physical, a little bit taller, a little bit more set play orientated, whereas South Korea are very much kind of high intensity. Like South Korea, I've been the same, I think, for 20 years, since I hadn't really watched a single South Korea game till 2002 World Cup, and I couldn't believe the way they pressed, the way they ran, the way they attacked wing spaces. I was like, my God. And I think that's probably an Asian part of like the hard working nature of the way they play. Um,
you see, that's it. Sorry to interrupt you. Like that's a game some people will look at on the schedule and go, "I'll miss that." You know, well, genuinely, because there are those games you have to miss. They're like the I don't know, like the mid-table ones that end up last the match of the day. But you know, that's really eye-opening.
yeah. I'm trying to just scroll through these and see which ones I think would be like really interesting for people to check out for that might be Switzerland, Bosnia. Switzerland, Bosnia, that's match day two. That'll be an absolute cracker. I think you've basically got two completely different approaches to football. Switzerland were my favourite team at Euro 2024. 24? Yep, Euro 24. Just the way they played, it didn't matter whether it was 3-4-3, 4-3-3, 4-4-2. Everyone kind of went wherever they wanted. And I seen that in the goal against Jordan yesterday. Was the left wing back ended up in centre mid, the right wing back ended up at right wing with the right winger inside the pitch. It was They're kind of all over the place, and I think they've got trust that the likes of Shaka, Froyle, or Abisha know what they're doing. They're very experienced players. They can the coach trusts them to go wherever feels natural. Whereas Bosnia are very much 4-4-2. We stay in our structure. We try and counter attack, and then we try and find our two tall strikers inside the box and score from there. So that'll be like a good matchup for me. USA, Australia, Mexico, South Korea. I mean, actually England v Ghana, but I suspect England will have enough in that game. I'm looking forward, obviously, to Scotland v Brazil, because I think Brazil could actually be through by that point, and Scotland might need something from that game. It could be like a really, really good contest to see. Norway, France being the final one from round three. I've said this. I think Norway are going to be an absolute shock to everyone in this tournament how good they are, and it shouldn't be, because if you've got Martin Odegaard and Erling Haaland in your team at the top end, it shouldn't be a surprise that you're going to be good. But Antonio Nusa is going to be the young player of the tournament. He's got so much to do. I like watching him in that Sweden game. I was blown away just by how good he was, and I think that's been coming from him now. I think now 2021, he's now starting to believe in himself and see what he can do. I think Norway could be like a real surprise package. So seeing them against France could be really interesting, because, like I said, France feel a bit like a vibe team. Just find your way to get out of the tournament, find your way to start building confidence. And when you do that, then you've got key players to do what you need to do. but I think sometimes maybe teams with a bit more rigidity and aggressiveness and power, like Norway do, could really surprise somebody.
I think we should clip up 48 clips of you going, yeah, I think Norway will do
Yeah.
it. I think Bosnia will do it. Just so we can play it back and then help you out.
John, thank you so much. Well, look, we not mentioned refereeing or VAR. I think we'll leave you off that one because that's probably well unfair to put you in that space because who knows about that world and how that impacts on some of this stuff. But you've certainly, I think, you've got us excited about the World Cup, so we can get those wall charts up now. It's like just over a week or so away, and we can start getting ourselves invested. But generally, what you've done, I think, is like Ray mentioned there. You look at the fixture schedule, and you kind of think we don't really know what we're saying no to. Sometimes we'll get that one a miss because we've not done the analysis that you've done, and you kind of May's points there that actually a lot of these games are really worth looking at for different reasons, and some of these people that we won't be familiar with and teams are worth having an eye on because that is the World Cup, isn't it? That's what it should be about. Seeing different things and stuff. So I'm going to be all over that Switzerland Bosnia game on match day 2. And everything else you mentioned. But we definitely cannot go, Ray and John and me here. We've got to do a prediction, haven't we? We've got to put it out there. We've got to do it, I'm afraid. And then we can laugh at ourselves in just over a month and a bit's time and say how wrong we were. But and I'm not going first. So I don't know, Ray, you can choose who would like, if you had to predict one team that might come out victorious, who would you have to go for?
France.
You're going France. All right. Good, Ray.
Yeah.
John?
Just
Uh,
quality. Just quality.
I'm going the exact same. I think France could field two teams that could win this World Cup, and I just think the worst possible thing that could have happened was people starting to doubt Kylian Mbappe just before a World Cup.
Woke the beast.
An
Yeah.
absolute bee in his bonnet,
Yeah.
and this is like the World Cup. That's been 2 World Cups in a row. It's been his stage, so I just can't see past France. It would need to be something
Say when we
drastic.
yeah when we do this I love it and hate it when you make this prediction because it's like I do think that if you're one of those top teams and you get to the last 8, that's probably about right, and then it's just a shootout. You know what I mean? And it's a drum I've beat for quite some time because you think of even about England, you think a missed penalty or a decision or whatever. I think it changes everything. Go on then, Scott. You say it. You tell us.
Well, I think if I had to put my money on it, I'd probably go for Brazil. I just think it's their home kind of in that space, and they've got that flair thing, haven't they? And we've all grown up, Brazil World Cups just have that thing, don't they, about them? And I think being back over that way suits them. And that, they've got, and they're not maybe the whole Brazil of the old 70s and 80s that we knew and loved, but they've certainly got a bit about them still, haven't they? So, but it'd be nice to see definitely also a new winner, wouldn't it? And someone a bit different maybe. And like you said, John, I think there's that possibility, right? The way the world is now, and these teams they're more tactically astute about stuff. And it may not be Jordan, to be fair, but some of the other smaller nations might come through. So it would be quite good to see that as well. But we'll have to wait and see.
John, where do we follow you? Where's the best place? Where's the most up to date place to follow you as you go through this epic
Pro-
project?
Probably Twitter and X, John Walker underscore 1986, just because for all Twitter's flaws, they're still the only people that have the most updated copyright law. So there's like copyright law around when you use footage, as long as it's telestrated, voiced over, new music, repurposed for education, you can use anyone's content. There's no like you can't use Sky Sports stuff. That's been and gone now, but the other platforms are still quite rigid and old fashioned in that they're still considering that copyright. So most of my stuff will be on Twitter and X because it's the most free platform to do the stuff that I do.
Right.
And what will you do during the World Cup? I'm obviously watching it, but are you going to update on bits and pieces as it's going
Yeah,
through? Is
yeah,
that the
yeah,
plan?
yeah. Like the plan is to basically look if any teams are changing formation, what the patterns are for those teams. So if teams make specific subs in tight games all the time, that's probably something I'll highlight. If teams are playing a different way that I didn't expect, I'll probably highlight that and update that. If there's key players that I didn't expect, if there's technical things I didn't expect, I'll just constantly be clipping as the games are going and just kind of live feeding the analysis for people waking up if they're not staying up to kind of pick up because like I said, I didn't want to do just a one and done 48 team pre-tournament. I wanted to have it being like a live body of work that people can use to see what I've chosen to update within those teams and how that moves, and then covering every game, to be honest, to try and create like an actual pre-match matchup document. Like this is where I see the strengths of these teams going at each other and where I think each team could get a goal from. Is there any set play frailties within one team that the other one's strong at? And just kind of trying to guide people. And because I always like a couple of quid on a game. So if I'm looking at teams that a player could score for a headed corner, who's likely to set that up? Is there 100 to 1 shot for an assist and a headed goal? Let's try and get something fun put out there.
Notifications on.
Brilliant, John. Thank you so much. It's been fascinating to have a little bit of chat about the broader picture of everything, and not just looking at the half dozen teams we all know and familiar with. So thank you for doing that. Ray, thank you for organising this. Maybe we could get you back on, John, afterwards and have a little post World Cup one if you're happy to do that, and see what we learned and what we got right and what we didn't get right, and any surprises that may have come out of it. Would you be happy to do that?
Absolutely, mate.
Awesome. Anything I've not said, Ray? Anything I've missed before we switch off?
So I can't wait now. It just whets the appetite, and you're absolutely right. Because as soon as the domestic stuff, and look, being Irish, the kind of, we had our deflated moment when we didn't qualify in the playoffs. So maybe you guys are probably looking at it much further out than I was, but I've definitely got the bug now. I can't wait.
Top man, brilliant. Thank you, John. We'll enjoy it. We'll be following all your stuff you put out there. So thank you for keep doing that. Thank you for doing it. And we'll look forward to catching up after the World Cup to see what we got right and who won.
Awesome.
Brilliant. Cheers, guys.
Thanks, everyone. Cheers all.
This episode was brought to you in association with our friends at Soccer Coach Weekly. Established since 2006, Soccer Coach Weekly is a leading source of inspiration and advice for all grassroots coaches. Join thousands of youth soccer coaches just like you, saving time and effort in their goal of having the most effective, enjoyable and successful coaching journey for them and their players. Thanks for listening. I hope you enjoyed the episode.